Hello and welcome to our group debate for ABA School-Wide Positive Behavior Support. My name is Aaron and I will be the moderator for this group debate. In this debate, we will be comparing the differences between ABA and School-Wide Positive Behavior Support, also known as SWIBs. The pro side will be arguing that ABA and SWIBs are connected and share many of the same principles, whereas the con side will be arguing that they are loosely connected at best. Now I'd like to transition to Kayla, who will be introducing the pro side arguments. Kayla?
Thank you, Aaron. As Aaron stated, we feel that SWIBs and ABA are connected and share much of the same principles. As stated in a cluster of randomized trial to evaluate external support for the implementation of positive behavioral interventions and supports by school personnel, the practices and systems of SWIBs are organized along a three-tiered continuum of prevention with behavioral theoretical orientation and the empirical foundation of applied behavior analysis. As the statement states, the system of SWIBs derives from ABA. To understand the relationship that the two share, we first need to discuss what SWIBs is. The acronym SWIBs stands for School-Wide Positive Behavior Support. As stated, it affects the School-Wide Positive Behavior Support on Teacher Self-Efficacy by Clem and McIntosh. School-Wide Positive Behavior Support is an approach to enhance school environment for students and teachers alike. SWIBs refers to approaches used to promote a positive school environment that can facilitate success in teaching and learning, increase desired behaviors in students, and decrease instances of problem behavior. SWIBs is a system that schools are turning to put into place to increase the positive behavior and decrease the negative behaviors. This system is to help replace the traditional systems of just sending the student to the principal's office without ever addressing the real issue at hand. SWIBs approach helps to put in interventions on the antecedent side to prevent negative behaviors. So now that we know SWIBs works to increase positive behavior, what does SWIBs look like once it's rolled out in a school? First, SWIBs is made up of a team of professionals from within the school. This group of individuals is trained by BCBAs and SWIBs experts on the basic components of SWIBs and ABA. Next, this group of professionals set specific goals for the school. They work together to train all other school professionals on the SWIBs outroll, and they monitor the rollout of SWIBs. This system of professionals helps ensure that the rollout of SWIBs within the school district will be implemented with fidelity. Additionally, this group of professionals works together to set the standards and goals for the school. This goal setting being completed by a group of professionals within the school allows goals to be customized for the specific school. Not following a generic set of goals allows each school to meet their individualized needs. Next, the group of individuals is in charge of monitoring the data that is taken to monitor the success of SWIBs. It may be done on a larger scale. For example, by looking at detention referrals, it still allows the professionals to know which students may need more assistance to be successful. Once this data is collected, it is used to monitor the three-tier system that is set up for the students. It helps professionals know which students are succeeding on each tier and which students need more assistance. Tier 1 is the general tier for the whole school. So these are checkoffs that are put in place for the cafeteria, bus route, halls. It helps students know what's expected of them in each of these areas. Tier 2 is more specialized for students who are not succeeding on Tier 1 and may need more supports. And finally, Tier 3 is an individualized system for students who are not succeeding on either Tier 1 or 2. This tier system helps ensure that all students are benefiting from SWIBs and are being provided with the best support that they can be. Now that we have discussed the basic components of SWIBs, we will discuss exactly how it derives from ABA. Kincaid and Anderson state in applying behavior analysis to school violence and discipline problems, behavior analysis is applied, behavioral, analytic, conceptual, technological, effective, and displays generality. As we all know, these standards were set by Bayer and are very important to the field of ABA, but how does this apply to SWIBs? It applies to SWIBs because SWIBs was designed to contain all of these concepts, which demonstrates that SWIBs is an application of behavior analysis. We will discuss further how these standards help show SWIBS is derived from the ABA. At this time, I'd like to turn it back over to Aaron.
Thank you, Kayla. Now I'd like to transition to Omar, who will be providing the con side's main points in the group debate. Omar?
Hi, thanks, Aaron. So I'd just like to briefly state our side of the argument for the con side of this debate, and that will include myself and Leslie. We're going to put up evidence against SWIBS and its association with ABA, and talk about how the two are dissimilar and how the connection between them is weak. SWIBS definitely has its foundation and it's originated from ABA, but that might be where the relationship between the two ends. First, some of the differences discussed between the two categories include SWIBS' lack of evidence and its implementation, as well as its lack of meeting some of the pillars of ABA, that of being applied, technological, and analytical. Secondly, SWIBS is systematically different than ABA. It focuses on an entire group, a whole group contingency, rather than on the individuals within that group. This does not match ABA and may even violate a BACB code of conduct for behavior analysts. Finally, we'll also discuss the cost of implementing SWIBS as an impediment to its application, and it can range up to $10,000 over 2 years for the implementation of SWIBS, and that's only considering one of the tiers of SWIBS. Now I'd like to hand it back to Aaron and begin our debate.
Thank you, Omar. Now we were going to move to the prover for the pro side, which is going to be Kayla again. So, Kayla.
Thank you, Aaron and Omar. As discussed earlier, SWIBS contains all the core principles that Bear outlines for ABA. We will now discuss each area in detail. Again, according to Kincaid and Anderson, SWIBS is an application of behavior analysis that is applied in a way that will make it last throughout time. They go on to say that SWIBS clearly meets all of Bear's suggestions in how to increase the applicability and utility of behavior analysis. This comment represents just how much SWIBS and ABA are intertwined. We will now discuss how SWIBS encompasses each of these 7 standards and suggestions that were set by Bear. The first area discussed is applied and behavioral. These are separate areas set by Bear, but in the definition of SWIBS, they combine them together. SWIBS, like ABA, uses a measure of efficacy to document and measure change. While the specific area measured may be different, both areas implement a standard measure to just demonstrate efficacy. With ABA, we may use one-on-one data sheets to take our data and measure our client success, and that's on a smaller scale, but SWIBS still takes data to measure the success of the students within the school. As stated earlier, one of the tools they may use is detention referrals. While this is on a larger scale, it still allows them to see which students are succeeding and which ones may need more assistance and get to the root cause of what's really going on. The second area discussed is analytic and conceptual. Again, the Kincaid and Anderson article combine analytic and conceptual in their definition of the standards. SWIBS stems from ABA in the fact that it uses database assessments and decision-making. Additionally, SWIBS is designed for specific schools, just like ABA designs interventions for specific clients. We spoke in our introduction about how SWIBS is made up of a group of professionals within the school. Having a group of professionals within the school allows the goals to be customized for that specific school district and help meet the school's specific needs. This demonstrates that while SWIBS is on a larger scale, it still stems from ABA and that it is sure to customize for its own client, being the school. SWIBS is also related to ABA in the use of its intervention components. Some of these components are token systems, reinforcing, and teaching of expected behaviors. And as we all know, we use these concepts on a daily basis in ABA. The third area is technological. Providing a detailed outline of the intervention, which is an ABA. Having this detailed outline allows us to know what is exactly expected in each intervention and helps us implement with fidelity. We spoke again about how the group of individuals within the school district that is specialized in SWIBs trains all individuals in the school. And this is done to, again, help ensure fidelity and that the intervention put in place is being met their standards across the school district. Next, effective. SWIBs is the application of theory and practice of behavior analysis to systems, levels, analysis, and change. SWIBs is applied in a manner such that it will be durable and maintained over time. SWIBs clearly meets Bayer's suggestions for increasing the applicability and utility of behavior analysis because it helps expand the field of ABA. Lastly, displays generality. SWIBs has been implemented in a variety of different schools that are located in different regions across the U.S. The generality and success of SWIBs in several schools is due to it deriving from applied behavior analysis. With SWIBs deriving from ABA, it helps lead it to be successful in a variety of settings. Additionally, with the generality being a big piece in proving the success of ABA, SWIBs has successfully shown that it displays generality with having success in several schools. All of these areas combined demonstrate the strength of SWIBs because of its principles being derived from the concepts of ABA. At this time, I'd like to turn it back over to Aaron.
Thank you, Kayla. Now we'd like to transition to the con side. We're going to transition to Leslie, who will be proving for the arguments for the con side. Leslie?
Thank you. Okay, I'm not disputing that school-wide positive behavior support has its roots in ABA, but I think that the two are loosely connected at best. SWIBs doesn't just pull from the foundations of ABA. To support such a widespread implementation throughout an entire school, PBS is guided by principles from biomedical sciences along with medical, behavioral, and educational variables, as stated by Dunlap and Carr in their 2012 article. SWIBs also has the awareness that in order to successfully implement at a school-wide level, multiple methodologies and theoretical perspectives need to be utilized. For instance, psychosocial research approaches tend to focus on large group studies, which are conducted much differently than single subject design studies, which is typically what's used in ABA. ABA research is not typically set up for the complex social environment of an entire school with countless population discrepancies. So to take the research and the theory and put it into a practical application, you have to pull from other sciences and how they are able to set up experiments at such a large scale. At the research level, SWIBs may have the intention to include all 7 pillars of ABA, but some of these are most certainly lost when, as stated before, when the theory moves to the application. Applied includes making changes that are socially significant. Dunlap and Carr mentioned that one of the defining features of SWIBs is to be a comprehensive lifestyle change. So if the most commonly used measure for success of SWIBs is the rate of referrals, how is this telling us anything about any of the alternative behaviors that have been effectively taught to replace the behavior that caused the referral in the first place? I personally haven't seen any data in the numerous articles I researched that makes the point to discuss the alternative behaviors and successful use for de-escalation and proactive success. Also, when talking about being technological, again, this is lost when moving from the theory to the application. SWIBs states that a professional in ABA will conduct the training. So I recently interviewed a teacher that is on the SWIBs board for an elementary school in Rochester, Indiana. And when I asked her whether the 2 individuals who led the training were BCBAs or had, backgrounds in ABA or what their credentials were, she had no idea. She had no idea their credentials or experiences or anything. So then she sat through this training, and then she's on the board for her school, and they're supposed to go back to their school. And these teachers who might not have known about ABA before are training the rest of the staff in the entire school. So on top of this, she's a special education teacher, and I asked if her students were also held to the same standards as the rest of school, hence being school-wide positive behavior support. And she said that they weren't. They weren't even taught any of the strategies that the rest of the school was using. So most of this have played, or most of us when we were younger played the game telephone. So you take this phrase and you pass it along, and by the very end of the game, the phrase that you hear is only a slight version, if that, of the original phrase. So we're expecting these teachers who sat through a couple of these trainings on ABA and SWIBs to take this information, to take these concepts of ABA and take the essence of ABA and disseminate this to an entire population of teachers who may or may not have heard of ABA before. So how is this even good for fidelity? It's not. ABA is based on a very systematic process with prescribed steps and data in and data on all variables to ensure a functional relationship. With all the extraneous variables that are present in conducting this in such a populated school setting, proven that SWIBs was the exact cause of behavior. So Berman and McLaughlin discussed this issue in their 1976 article, Implementation of Educational Innovation. And they quote, "The bridge between a promising idea and its impact on students is implementation." So this tends to be a very common theme among researchers looking at SWIBs as a branch of ABA. Pass and Bradshaw mentioned in their 2012 article about examining the association between implementation and outcomes that there needs to be more empirical research on fidelity and on the implementation of quality. And their exact quote from this is, "There is a considerable need for more research on factors that enhance or relate to the adoption and adequate implementation of programs and lead to effective practice and outcomes, particularly in school settings." And I wholeheartedly agree that there needs to be more research on the implementation fidelity. So most conversations regarding strategies and supports in schools almost always turn to the conversation of funding. Rob Horner, George Segay, and others do a really great job of posting this review of an article that talks about the cost of implementing SWIBs that was published by Blonigan in 2008 in the Journal of Positive Behavior Interventions. So this review, you can see in this graph, in this table here, it takes the information from the article and it just breaks it down into a table so it's easier to read. So this has the estimated costs per year when beginning to implement SWIBs in a district. When you start SWIBs, it's typically district-wide with multiple schools involved. So in this case, say that there's 15 schools involved, and then there's about 5 to 7 individuals on each team in each school. So taking into consideration the workshops, the cost of hiring a trainer, which is hopefully an ABA professional, finding substitute teachers to cover classes for these teachers that go to these trainings, and the data system that's needed, it comes out to about $5,000 per school over a 2-year period. We know that teaching has a high turnover rate. And so taking into consideration teaching new teachers, training new staff, and then more than likely hiring a district coordinator that's going to take over the research and the data collection and just make sure that the implementation is going well of the SWIBs. So taking in all of that, that takes the cost up to nearly $10,000 per school over a 2-year period. And this is just talking about tier 1 implementation. When you get into tier 2 and tier 3 and it does become a little more individualized, that's when you usually call in some outside professionals to do the FBAs or FAs and such, because the teachers and staff aren't typically qualified to do this. So then that's just going to be extra funding on top of that. So are all the schools prepared to spend this money, and do all of the schools even have the resources to do this? And back to you, Erin.
Thank you, Leslie. Now we will be transitioning to Kylie, and she will be providing the attacking arguments for the pro side. Kylie?
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you, Erin. Leslie, I want to talk about your previous statement that there's a lack of research on the implementation of SWIBs. So if we're questioning the implementation of the principles itself, are we not questioning the people that are implementing these programs? Because you just described in your visual a graph that raises prices well over $4,000 to $5,000 for training staff and hiring a district coordinator. What you're saying means that this money might be wasted because your argument is that SWIBS is not implemented correctly enough to be considered in the umbrella of applied behavior analysis. While I do believe that there needs to be more studies proving this fact, that money is spent on the professionals in the field of ABA. Training those staff members, special educators, and directors to implement the programming actually advocates for our field. I want to talk about some ways that SWIBS actually advocates for ABA. In an article by Matt Tincani in 2007, he states, while the need for trained individuals in behavior analysis is apparent, many advocates of positive behavior supports are actually non-experts. They are teachers, special educators, parents, administrators, etc. And successful implementation of PBS actually provides an opportunity for these non-experts to learn and practice evidence-based programming within schools. So what I'm saying is the majority of people actually implementing SWIBS are non-experts. They are trained by ABA experts, but the programming is actually carried out by everyday people in the school systems. If we say that applied behavior analysis and SWIBS are one and the same, this gives us an opportunity to provide a chance for ABA to be proven as a field. If these non-experts implement the programming correctly, they'll see a change and a difference that it's making in the children's behavior. It'll then make them believe in the programming, and by believing in SWIBS, they're opening up to believing in ABA. Therefore, dissemination of our field occurs. This argument can be made not only to show that SWIBS further disseminates ABA, but also to combat the position that it is negative to have non-experts, non-BCBAs, non-RBTs, and other non-professionals in ABA using the principles of behavior analysis. Not only that, this answers to the argument that SWIBS would be a threat to ABA. It's not a threat to our field, it's actually an opportunity to lobby for the effectiveness of our principles we believe in. Those principles taught in SWIBS are the same principles taught that are derived from ABA. So the non-professionals being able to implement those makes for a better classroom setting, provides them basic behavioral framework as they parent their children, if they have children, etc., and it can be used in daily life as well. Including SWIBS in the relationship to applied behavior analysis also has several benefits. SWIBS focuses on prevention, which is a major factor in ABA. In ABA, we use antecedent strategies to alter the environment to decrease behavior. And in SWIBS, they're doing kind of the same, focusing on prevention. For example, in a school-wide positive behavior support plan, they might be showing a video in their classroom every day on the school rules. So they're focusing on preventing the behavior of breaking school rules. Just like in ABA, we use those antecedent strategies by altering the environment, teaching coping skills, focusing on preventing or providing replacement behaviors whose
Well, it looks like we lost her. I think we're gonna have to pause it here, guys, unfortunately. You're muted, Leslie.
They just move on with it, and then if she comes back in, then she can finish her piece and fit it in.
Okay, can do. In that instance, we will transition to Omar. Omar will be providing the attacking arguments for the con side, and hopefully we can get Kylie back. Omar?
All right, thanks, Aaron, and thank you to Kylie and Kayla. So I want to go back to the point that Kylie was making about using non-experts in the field of ABA, or sorry, in the field of SWIBs, in implementing ABA principles. So this is done all the time in ABA. We bring in entry-level people to implement behavior analysis as implementers or as behavior techs, whatever the term may be. However, in behavior analysis, the implementers are trained thoroughly, and then they are supervised consistently and constantly. The same can't be said for the implementers of ABA principles within the field of SWIBs. In one study that explored the implementation of SWIBs across 7 different states in the US, the researchers, Horner and others from 2013, found that building coaching and training capacity that was geographically available throughout the state of high quality and coordinated statewide was a major barrier to their scaling. So this statement essentially by the authors is saying that the difficulty in expanding SWIBs and in finding expertise that is available across the states is an impediment. And the point here being that using non-experts in the field of SWIBs is fine as long as they're sufficiently trained and their oversight is consistent and constant. But this is not the case with SWIBs, or it does not appear to be. On to the point that SWIBs is good for ABA. In the Behavior Analyst Code of Conduct, BACB Code 2.0, there's a point about treatment efficacy, and essentially it says that a behavior analyst has the responsibility to create the most effective intervention for his or her client. So this would essentially be a difficult point to convince others of, given the fact that SWIBs is done on such a broad scale and on a whole group contingency. How could you be sure that a single individual within that school or larger setting is receiving the best intervention for him or herself? So one would say that promoting ABA through SWIBs in this light is not the best strategy. Additionally, the argument that SWIBs is good for ABA is not completely clear, as it is lacking in evidence at the Tier 2 and Tier 3 levels, where SWIBs becomes closer and in line with ABA and even includes functional analyses. In a study examining a scale used to measure the effectiveness of SWIBs, the researchers, Horner and others from 2004, found that while they were able to show prevention at the Tier 1 level, the scale lacked information on the secondary and tertiary levels. And in another article discussing the limitations of assessing SWIBs, the authors Scott and Barrett from 2004 stated that they were limited by the inability to make causal references. They lacked a demonstrated reliability of measurement and included potential historical confounds over time and definition of time as money. So to summarize, they essentially are saying they could not reliably make causal references. They could not assess effectiveness consistently and were not able to assess the cost effectiveness reliably. So to go along with the evidence of prevention, these SWIB schools excuse me, have discrepancies in their effectiveness throughout the different schools based on their locations. For example, and Aaron can pull up the graphic, inner city schools have much higher rates of referrals than typical, quote unquote, typical schools in higher income neighborhoods. And this is by the authors Warren and others from 2003, where they studied SWIB's implementation across different locations. And a lack of effectiveness across socioeconomic lines is troubling, and it does not reflect well on ABA when we think of it as one and the same as SWIBs. Finally, I would like to end here with the fact that there is a divide between the two fields, with experts from each field essentially putting down the others from the other field. In an article by Wise and others from 2003, they discussed how some researchers refer to SWIBs as comprehensive, proactive, flexible, and pragmatic, while referring to ABA as merely traditional. This implies that ABA is merely traditional and does not include those characteristics of being comprehensive, proactive, flexible, or pragmatic. And then on the other side, ABA researchers are critical of SWIBS and refer to it as watered down and a less powerful intervention. This theme of divided researchers isn't good for either field and doesn't bode well for a cohesive connection between ABA and SWIBS. That's my argument, and I'll hand it back to Aaron now. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. Now we're going to transition to salvaging remarks for the pro side. We're going to transition to Kayla.
Actually, I have Kylie over here. If she can add in some of her remarks, just last of her salvaging remarks for her. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead, Kylie.
Sorry, guys. I'm experiencing some technical difficulties, but I got the internet to work at least for a phone call. What I was saying whenever I got cut off by the internet was that measuring effectiveness comes from referral rates. When SWIBS training, the SWIBS training handouts say that data collection will be a component through the Tier 1 system, through the Tier 3 system. They even give a PDF downloadable document that takes you step by step, continuing data collection throughout the whole process and graphing as you continue. Dissemination means to spread information, to gain members and to inform others about it. Dissemination is critical for the field of ABA. With misinformation and negative beliefs about our field circling constantly to those whom are inexperienced or uneducated, allowing non-experts the opportunity to experience and be educated on ABA principles through positive behavior supports in schools is a critical opportunity to disseminate our field of ABA. As those non-experts, teachers, educators, and parents, etc., mention their students, they will believe in the behavioral principles of SWIBS, therefore believing in the behavioral principles of ABA. However, if we go to say that the two are not intertwined, this opportunity would not exist. We can continue to grow upon the relationship that already exists between SWIBS and ABA. Going forward, if the field of SWIBS and ABA continue to work together to improve the existing relationship, it will not only help improve the practice of SWIBS in schools, but also lend a hand in expanding the field of ABA. We can do this by performing more research in the areas of fidelity and also in the areas of implementation and SWIBS in school.
All right. Thank you, Kylie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kylie, and Leslie for helping out Kylie there. I believe now we're going to transition to salvaging arguments. Kayla, would you be okay taking over the salvaging arguments for Kylie?
Actually, Kylie just spoke of our salvaging arguments, so we'll be turning it over to Leslie to salvage for the con side.
Oh.
Thank you, though, Aaron.
Yep. Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you. So the points were brought up. Kylie was talking about some, and Omar also brought it up about how that there was training and that there are ABA professionals and stuff overseeing these things. But I think that Omar brought up a good point, saying that there needs to be the oversight throughout for the fidelity and implementation. So even though at the beginning how Kylie says that professionals are brought in and they teach, yeah, that might be true in most circumstances, but the oversight is really what's important. So having that district coordinator that actually has the experience in ABA and BCBA and with school-wide positive behavior support, and taking that and showing the implementation throughout the entire process, as well as looking at those alternative behaviors that are taught. Because if it is part of ABA, then we need to see that these other behaviors are being taught and that referrals aren't just being down, because that can be from a lot of different variables. If schools know that SWIBS is starting and they're trying to compete with other schools, teachers just might not give out as many referrals, and they might just kind of ignore some behavior. We don't know these things. So I really do think that there needs to be a lot more data to back this, to really show that it would be the same as ABA. So the con side where we're stopping at is that it's loosely connected at best.
All right. Thank you, Leslie. I'd like to thank everyone in the group who participated participate and help out, especially with those technical difficulties. So as a group, we have come to the consensus that we believe that ABA and SWIBS are loosely connected. As the pro side showed, both programs show similar principles and goals for how they affect behavior. However, as the con side showed, that because of the large scale of the classroom, there's a lack of experimental control from the pillars of ABA. So as a group, we've concluded that these programs are not the same, but they are loosely connected. So I would like to thank everyone in the group for working hard on this project and helping out with technical difficulties. And thank you very much. Bye.